Haunted whisper bends our minds, reading every shiver, every creak in the floor. In a battle with phantoms, we yearn for more. Haunted halls call our names, paranormal games in the spectral frame. Demons lurk, spirits scream, in a dark horse chase through the broken seam. Footsteps follow in the icy mist. Shadows swallow, we can't resist. Recording the silent with every breath. In the heart of mystery, we dance with death. Bones and ashes scattered untold. Secrets in the darkness, tight they hold. Chris and the team seeking the roar. In the realm where the living touch the old. Bones and ashes scattered untold. Secrets in the darkness, tight they hold. Chris and the team.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Darkhorse Paranormal. Here we'll take you to a number of alleged vampire stories from around the UK. So let's dive straight into subterranean vampires. First, allow me to take you 2.5 miles southwest of Durham to the disused Brandon Colliery. It opened in 1856 and closed in 1968, and like many other coal pits, this coal pit was the scene of many tragic deaths, and many of those that died were children. Like pick carrier Frank Love, who on the 31st of October 1871 died tragically, just aged 12. One summer evening, 1969, a woman from Meadowfield, a small village in County Durham, told a bemused constable that a man in black had attacked her, wrestled her to the floor, and had attempted to bite her neck. Fortunately for this lady, the approach of a gang of children had startled him, and the assailant got onto his feet and ran off at incredible speed. The children were supportive and helped the woman up, and told her that they had seen the same weird-looking man a few days back, running down the grassy embankment leading onto the railway tracks of Brandon Colliery Station. They also explained that the father of one of the children had spotted the same man in outdated black clothing coming from the direction of Brandon Colliery a fortnight before. A rumour at the time was going around Meadowfield and beyond about a vampire being at large in the vicinity of the abandoned coal pit. It is also reported that several people claim to have had encounters with the same man, now being spoken about and classed as a local vampire, and quite a few of these reports describe the red rash around the creature's mouth and a pair of long fanged teeth. These strange vampire reports lasted until autumn. During this time, the nights around Brandon Colliery were filled with an uneasy silence. Was it all just hearsay, or did one of the undead stalk the people of Meadowfield? I'd like to point out here there have been a number of other reports of vampiristic entities prowling caverns, caves, quarries, coal and limestone pits around Britain. I'm thinking of it, what would be a better place for a vampire to have his or her lair than a secluded, light-free coal mine hundreds of feet below ground? With that being said, here is a little bit on the Hamstoke vampire. The Hamstoke vampire was said to live in such an ideal setting in the Guernsey Down Mounds of Bodmin Moor, Cornwall, in the early 19th century. However, little is known about this vampire beyond the local tales of a shadowy hunched figure that roamed the moor after midnight, often at the time of a full moon, in search of vulnerable late-night travellers. Hamstoke, the parish after which the vampire is named, was the exception of Altonon, the largest parish in Cornwall. It was bounded by St Clair, Altonon, Broadoak, Temple, Blissland and Warlegan, and on the moor in the vicinity of this latter village, which even today is remote and atmospheric, an alleged vampire attack once took place. It was around the year 1800 where two girls in their teens who decided to leave their cottage in Warlegan one night to go and meet with a gypsy boy. The two girls who were cousins were named Helena Jones and Mary Redden, and they foolishly decided to walk 3 miles north of Warlegan into and onto the chilly moor. Helena held a lantern to light the way, and upon this moonless stormy night a strong wind blew out the lantern, and the torrential rain hammered down on Bodmin Moor. The two girls became disorientated and wandered far away from the place where they agreed to meet with the gypsy lad. It was here a man came out of the darkness and persuaded the girls to accompany him to an old cottage, and once inside they held on to one another in front of a roaring fire, shivering and unsure of the stranger's motives. The stranger asked the girls to remove their clothes so he could dry them, but the teenagers declined and warmed themselves by the fire with the intent of drying their soaked clothes whilst wearing them. The strange man made a sudden grab at Helena and tore off her coat and bodice, but as he tried to bite her lower neck and shoulder, Mary grabbed the poker in the fire, and after pushing its glowing tip into his back, She clubbed at the back of his head, but not as hard as she wanted, because she felt weakened with fear. Elena managed to free herself from the attacker, and she and Mary ran into an ancient room and managed to bolt the door. However, in this room, which served as a kitchen, they found an old woman dead on the floor. Her corpse reeked of a foul smell, and the dead woman had 2 red puncture marks on her wrinkled neck. The man knocked heavily on the door but said nothing, and Elena and Mary managed to open the window of the kitchen and darted off into the dark night. While escaping through the dark night, they thought they could hear the unearthly attacker crying their names, but they managed to talk themselves into thinking it was just the wind howling across the moors. It was only by miracle Elena reached their home, and she and Mary fell down on the doorstep, exhausted, soaked to the bone, and in tears. Elena's grandmother later told her granddaughters that she thought they had almost met their grisly fate at the hands of Brooker, the Hamstoke find. He was the vampire who was thought to be the offspring of the devil himself and the local tramp named Jane Wilmington. Booker lived in abandoned and waterlogged mines under Bodmin Moor. Some also said that he was in the league with the demonic sprite creatures known as kobolds. Now taking you to the 1900s. It is said that a school teacher from Launceston was enjoying a day out picnicking on Bodmin Moor with a sweetheart when he decided to quote Oscar Wilde during a spectacular sunset. He proclaimed, "Death must be so beautiful, to lie in the soft brown earth with the grasses waving above one's head, and listen to silence, to have no yesterday and no tomorrow, to forget time, to forgive life, to be at peace." It was at this point a sniggering sound was heard behind the couple, and the schoolteacher turned to see the shocking sight of a very tall, thin man in black, with an unnaturally pale face and a head devoid of any hair. His eyes were dark slits, and the stranger's hands were large, with long fingers that tapered into pointy nails. Just as the teacher and his fiancée got onto their feet, and the tall freak lunged at them, he clawed the face of the teacher and tore the arm of his shirt off as the woman ran off screaming. When the woman returned to the scene of the attack with the farmer and his son, they saw the teacher kneeling in the grass with blood streaming from his empty eye sockets. In the teacher's hand he held one of his own eyeballs that had been clawed out by the sinister attacker. The teacher's other hand searched the glass for the other eyeball, and upon seeing his sweetheart fainted. The teacher remained in shock for a while, and then also lost consciousness due to the lack of blood and the severity of the pain. When the teacher was examined by a doctor, odd puncture marks not made by normal human teeth were found on the left forearm. The police searched for the wicked, violent culprit, but he was never found, and the locals talked in hushed tones about the Hamstoke vampire in the inns around Warleggan and St. Neots. It was said that garlic was sold in great quantities that year, and hawthorn crosses were hung on many of the doors to repel the feared vampire. Was this the attacker merely a jealous rival of the teacher, or was he the apparently ageless Hamstoke vampire? There is a curious report to those tales of the Hamstoke bloodsucker, which we'll get on next. Allow me to take you to 1931. A very unpopular man of the cloth, the Reverend Densham, took one of the most difficult times on record at St. Bartholomew's Church in Warleggan at the age of 61. Densham alienated his congregation to such an extent with his theories he ended up topping the fence of his rectory with barbed wire and allowed Alsatians to roam the grounds. The doors of the church were opened only to a select few that Densham saw eye to eye with, and if these few churchgoers were just a minute late for the service, they would find the church doors bolted against them. The majority of people forming the small church were farmers, yet Densham frowned on their eating habits and declared being a vegetarian was the civilized way to eat. In the end, the church lost members until just 2 people attended Mass, and then he even insulted those final loyal churchgoers too. A close friend pleaded with the harsh rector to be less strict, but he remained focused on his methods and remarked to the villagers of Warleggan, "They all come to me in the end as I conduct all the funerals. They won't come to church on their feet, but they'll have to come in their black carriages." Incredibly, the deranged reverend preached to his non-existent congregation and eventually resorted to placing life-size cardboard cutouts of people in the pews. What's more, after each pointless service, he would write in the register book, "No fog, no wind, no rain, no congregation." The Reverend Densham refused to visit his flock in Warleggan, and in the 1950s, when rumours circulated about the local vampire friend being active again, several people wrote to Densham to tell him about the strange sightings of a ghoul. A shopkeeper in the village who delivered milk and food to the balmy rector learned that the apparition had recently visited the church during Densham's sermon to his cardboard congregation, and the visitation had given the odd reverend a nasty turn. Not long afterwards, the Reverend Densham was found dead on the stairs of the rectory, with a look of intense terror on his twisted face, and some congregated that the thing had scared Densham to death. Despite Densham's wishes to be buried within a specific created garden of remembrance within the rectory, his body was instead cremated and the ashes sprinkled at a public park of remembrance at Plymouth. I'll now take you beneath Ingleborough Hill in the Yorkshire Dales National Park. There exists a network of underground caves, discovered in 1923 by 2 amateur geologists named Long and Churchill. The White Scar Caves, as this network is called, have one of the largest cave chambers in Britain and are now open to the public as a popular tourist attraction. Throughout the 1930s, an enormous dark blue bat-like bird was seen to fly to and from the White Star Caves, mostly during the evenings, and this unidentified creature was thought by some of the locals to be a vampire bat. The bird's wingspan was estimated to be 6 feet or more, and the head of a strange Optimus Ceatrid had pointy ears. In 1933, a man named John Bray kept a vigil in the caves for this sinister night bird, and his long watches throughout one particular cold winter's night paid off when the giant bat put in an appearance. Mr. Bray claimed he saw the bat look like a human figure with huge wings, but only saw the creature in silhouette against the moonlit sky of snow clouds. Bray startled the apparently human bird hybrid that emitted a blood-curdling shriek, raised its wings and flew out of the cave at an incredible speed. John Bray began to held successive vigils hoping the brazier creature to return, but never did. Other people saw this bearman, including a policeman at Chapelleydale village. A similar giant bird with human features was reported between September 1968 and June 1970. Mostly at sites located along the Bridgewater Canal at Preston Brook and parts of Runcorn. At around 11 p.m. one night in September 1968, 2 men on a barge on the Bridgewater Canal at Preston Brook saw an enormous dark bird with a wingspan of at least 12 feet descend from a clear starry sky and land with a thud on a barge moored about 60 feet away in a marina. The men were so afraid of the large, huge bird, they hid in their canal boat and wouldn't come up until they heard the creature's wings flapping as it flew off into the night. The same oversized bird was seen during the following month over East Runcorn and Moldyshaw, and several witnesses described the flying monstrosity as resembling a giant bat. These unidentified overgrown birds have been seen across the globe, and many theories have been expounded by an attempt to explain their existence. Some think they are a Petrosaurus, a type of prehistoric bird that did not die out millions of years ago, when the other dinosaurs met their mysterious worldwide death. Others think that the creatures are merely unidentified species of bird, but that seems rather unlikely, and most ornithologists would scoff at this possibility. Could a bird be believed to have been extinct for millions of years be flown around today? This brings us to question, could a bird believed to have been extinct for millions of years still be flying around today? It's highly unlikely, so what are we to make of things of these giant bat sightings? Are they from some parallel universe perhaps, or does the answer lie in the supernatural sphere? Are these monstrous creatures of the winged vampiric beings who have undergone some sinister metamorphosis to become bat-like humanoid identities? I'll now take you to the spring of 1922. An enormous black bat with a wingspan of 6 feet was seen circling the spire of West Drayden Church during a night of a full moon. Several terrified witnesses watched the creature dive into the churchyard, where it roamed among the gravestones. When it was chased by 2 policemen, the creature let out a loud, blood-curdling screech, flapped its wings and soared skywards. An old man who claimed he had seen the giant bat 25 years previously maintained that it was a spirit of a vampire who had murdered a woman to drink her blood in Harmondsworth in the 1890s. Again in Thornton Heath, Surrey, in 1938, a woman reported being attacked in the night on 3 occasions by a large winged creature with fangs. Each time it flew into her bedroom and drew blood from her neck, leaving her weak with fear. There was also a sighting one night in November 1963, where 4 teenagers were walking along a country road near Hythe in Kent when they saw something very strange. A tall figure of a man in black, minus a head, with a bat wing sprouting from his back, approached them on foot. The teenagers ran off in fright. This entity is remarkably similar to the so-called Mothman. A little bit away from the UK, however, he haunted West Virginia in the United States in 1966. Like the Kent entity, Mothman did not seem to have a head, but 2 luminously red eyes set into his chest. It also had wings that were described as looking like those of a bat. The creature was seen by many people, and to this day, Mothman remains a mystery. We'll now dive in and talk about the tale of the Cornish Owlman. A humanoid entity with wings and large red owl-like eyes was seen in Cornwall between 1976 and 1978, and although encounters with the creature were reported in the press, the authorities didn't even bother to investigate. It's true, we all undergo metamorphosis or bodily change day by day as we age, but the concept of shape-shifting in vampire penetrates Bram Stoker's fictional Dracula changing into a bat. Vampires were not only thought to be able to take the form of a bat, but the form of many animals, including dogs and wolves, through a type of transfiguration. The most famous transfiguration is the one that takes place when the face of Jesus becomes as radiant as the sun and his robes become as white as snow upon Mount Thalbar. This transformation, referred to as metamorphy by St. Matthew and St. Mark, has also allegedly been observed in several mediums throughout history. The late Queenie Nixon, an alleged Northampton-born medium, gave many demonstrations of an astonishing physical mediumship from the 1950s to the 1980s, which her face would change into that of a stranger. Sitters at Queenie's demonstrations would become aware of gaseous substances similar to cigarette smoke that would swirl around the medium's face. This would be followed by the gradual materialization of pale masks on Queenie Nixon's face, and within minutes the face of the medium would become the face of a girl or an old man, sometimes sporting a mustache or beard. This phenomenon is usually explained by mediums in terms of ectoplasm and trance states, but scientists are skeptical of such claims. Could the vampire be capable of such metamorphosis, in which he or she turns into a bat-like creature? It's certainly food for thought. We'll now bring you to Lancashire. As a well-known, most of Lancashire is undermined by coal pits, and many of them are disused. It is said that in the Wigan area, many of the disused collieries are haunted. Considering the loss of life that was common down the coal mines in the 19th and 20th centuries, this is not surprising. However, one particular haunting is of interest and made it into our Vampires of the UK podcast because it involved an apparition of a Dracula-type vampire. This case was reported by a Preston journalist named William Topping around 1919 and was also investigated by a trio of amateur vampire hunters. These three brave, real-life Van Helsings were a bookseller from Workington, Cumberland, named Jonathan Carmichael, a photographer named John Warwick of Carlisle, and a soldier named James Dunn, who hailed from Bolton. In 1897, at an unnamed colliery near to Wigan, miners, upon reaching the bottom of the mine, had to walk for almost half an hour to reach the coal face. And one evening there was a commotion at the colliery because a very strange-looking man had been seen prowling around the considerable depth. The out-of-place stranger was said to be over 6 feet in height and have black, slicked black hair and an astrophoric face. He wore a long opera cloak, a suit of dark green velvet, and wore a dazzling collection of gold and silver rings incrusted with a variety of gemstones. He had an unrevealing habit of literally appearing out of thin air, and on one occasion had descended from the pit in a cage with 2 terrified miners. During the journey to the service, he spoke in a foreign language, possibly French, and when he walked out into the night air, he immediately turned into a huge bat and flew off into the ink-black sky. The weird foreigner was seen 5 times in all, and on the last occasion the vampire hunters Carmichael, Warwick and June, who heard about the strange shape-shifting nobleman from a relative of a miner at the pit, decided it was time for a showdown. They descended on the colliery and were given permission to track down the suspected bloodsucker. The cloaked stranger was spotted sneaking into the darkness by a collier who raised him, and the vampire hunters soon gave chase, but unfortunately their intrepid threesome was forced back when the quarry retreated down an old tunnel deemed unsafe because of a number of recent cave-ins. That tunnel ran for a quarter of a mile, yet another pit, and it was said that the misfiring, godly dressed Frenchman haunted that pit for a while until there was a cave-in. A body was recovered from the falling in of a roof, but the corpse was not of that suspected vampire, but that of a young miner. However, To us at Darkhorse Paranormal, we must rate this the most bizarre underground vampires. We're said to have been encountered on many occasions in the tunnels under Berlin, which lies about 5 miles southwest of Wigan. Within Berlin, to the southwest of Wigan, there's an area that has a big hill, locally known as the Lump, the crown of which looks down from 600 feet above sea level onto 16 countries. One can also see Ireland, Scotland, the Welsh Hills, and other areas of Britain and beyond from its breathtaking vantage point. But there's a lesser known place of interest beneath the bedrock around Berlin. And a case in point is the unidentified church that sunk into the earth at some time in the past. In the late 18th century, 4 local children decided to go and explore the limestone caverns in the area and vanished. One of the children was 9-year-old named Will, eventually resurfaced and revealed the terrifying and gruesome fate of his 3 friends. A group of old men in beards and black and green velvet clothes grabbed the children, and one of the men started to bite the neck of the youngest boy, who was only 5. As his screams echoed through the cave, Will managed to run off. He was pursued by 3 of the bizarrely dressed up men, but managed to outrun them. At one point, Will stumbled over human bones in a torchlit chamber, and the discovery frightened him so much he tried to desperately squeeze through a hole in the cave towards the daylight. As he was almost out the cave, a hand grabbed his foot and began to pull him back. Will kicked back with his foot and hit the person apprehending him in the face. The boy's foot was released and he ran off yelling for help. The local authorities were concerned because a number of people had gone missing within the area near the cave entrances. 2 heavily armed soldiers, possibly dragoons, descended into the caverns with torches and claimed that they not only found a heap of human bones, they also found the ruins of an ancient church of some unknown denomination. The interior of the church was lit by 3 large candles. In grotto-style gargoyles formed part of the altar. Throughout the exploitation of the underground, the soldiers said they felt as if they were being watched, and also heard voices speaking in an unknown language. One report said that the child's head was found in a cave, and also several stone jugs containing blood. Believing the evidence of cannibalism, gunpowder was used to seal the caves, so the riddle of the underground church of Berlin remains unsolved. Sunken churches are not found to be only in Lancashire but many corners of the UK. In Lincolnshire, for example, you'll find the story of a sunken church of Sandcliffe, in which the whole church and its congregation of sinners were swallowed up by the earth. Then there's the legend of Kirkland's chapel was sunk into the ground along with its priests and worshippers. For some modern folklorists believe an earthquake was to blame for the sinking of the church. At Fishery Brow near Kirby Lonsdale, Westmoreland, a legend has been told for centuries about a church that vanished into the ground with its parson and his congregation. From time to time, phantom bells have been heard at the spot where the church slid into the clay, and many people, upon putting an ear to the ground, have heard the faint ringing of church bells. Vampires are said to detest daylight and particularly sunlight, and I sometimes wonder if some of the 19th century great essences were in fact vampiric beings. Take the 5th Duke of Portland, William John Chalmers, veteran Scot, 1800 to 1879, who had an extensive subterranean complex evacuated under his estate at Welbeck Abbey in North Nottinghamshire. That included 8 tunnels covering a distance of 15 miles, an underground ballroom occupying 10,000 square feet and 2,000 dancers, a billiard room for 12 full-size billiards tables, and even an underground library. All of these rooms were lit by hundreds of gas jets and painted in a specific shade of pink that was agreeable with the Duke's eyes. The Duke detested sunlight, and his favourite time was from sunset to sunrise. In fact, he had a sunset scene painted on the ceiling of his huge ballroom. When he had to travel during the day, the Duke made his journeys in a black hearse-like carriage with shuttered windows so no light could touch his skin. Direct verbal communication with other people was forbidden by the Duke, and even when he was ill, the doctor was not allowed to see him, but instead had to instruct the valet to take the Duke's pulse from behind the door. Rumours naturally abounded about the 5th Duke of Portland. Some said he was disfigured or had a gruesome-looking skin disease, but a rare photograph taken of himself at the time of his self-imposed isolation shows him to be a pallid man with bushy side whiskers and dark, shrewd-looking eyes. Still, the rumours flew about the Duke. He obviously had wild orgies going on underground layer, for why would a reservedly lonely man want a ballroom with 2,000 dancers? Other people thought that he made some pact with the devil himself, for why did the Duke only walk in the grounds of Welbeck Abbey in the dead of night? And what of the Duke's bizarre taste in food? All he ate each day was freshly killed chicken. In 1879, the Duke had died and was buried in Kensal Green Cemetery in North London. Not long after the burial, strange rumours circulated about the Duke. Some believed he had been leading a double life at Welbeck Abbey, and this intriguing rumour had been arranged by the extraordinary claims made by a widow of Baker Street, London, named Anna Maria Druce. Miss Druce asserted that the late Duke had been her husband, Thomas Charles Druce, shop owner of a popular store stayed at Baker Street Bazaar. Thomas Druce died in 1864, but Miss Druce claims the burial had been bogus, as the coffin had been filled with lead. This has been staged by the Duke because he had tired of his alter ego Thomas Druce and then wanted to return to his adjusted life at Welbeck Abbey. Thomas Druce's grave in Highgate Cemetery was opened, and it did not contain lead at all. It contained the bearded decomposing corpse of Mr. Druce. The case brought to court by the scheming Mrs. Druce collapsed. That is not the end of the matter though. For months after the 5th Duke of Portland was laid to rest, his ghost was seen prowling Kensal Green Cemetery. This ghost wore a long black cloak and a dark green velvet suit. Was this merely a phantom of the Duke, or was the man who went out of his way to avoid the daylight a vampire? We may know more one day.